Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now, obviously, the setup here is much improved compared to the last couple of videos, which were more run and gun, vlog style. And that's because I've spent way too much time sitting in here and adjusting lighting and moving things around without actually sitting down and filming anything. So today we're here to fix that. Now, in my years of content creation, I get asked a lot of questions, and I wish I had the time to answer everything in every DM that I get, but unfortunately that's impossible. So I'm really excited to be into this type of long form and to kind of baptize this studio. We're gonna start off with a Q&A, me going through a bunch of the questions that I get asked, a lot of the things that you guys want to know about my creative process, and just line it all out in this unfiltered way. But with that being said, I just want to dive straight into it. Now, most of the questions that I get asked are all related to gear. What type of gear do I use? What type of gear do I recommend? Does gear even matter? Now, the way that I want to tackle this subject of gear is by starting at the beginning, what I think everyone who's just starting out with camera work should be thinking about, all the way up to the professional realm, as much as you can call me a professional, and what I think the focus shifts to. I am going to preface this by saying that everything is incredibly relative. There are so many different cameras out now, so much different software, so many different computers that can all do similar processes, at least enough to be able to create epic content in the way that you would want it to. So it's pretty impossible for anyone, especially me, to sit down and to give you the best camera, the best software, the best computer to edit with. There are so many different things that are dependent upon your situation, which is why when you're just barely beginning, starting out at ground one, the thing you should be thinking about is not really the gear. There are so many foundational principles of content creation like lighting and storytelling that play a much more significant role in you creating high-level content than the actual gear itself. It may not be what you want to hear, but for everyone starting out, my biggest piece of advice in the types of gear you should look for is first figure out what type of content you want to actually create. What type of storytelling do you do? What type of image do you want to portray? And once you've kind of figured that out and you use whatever you have available, your iPhone, the camera that your mom had in high school, whatever it's going to be, use that to figure out the direction you want to go into. Use that to be able to educate yourself on the actual content creation process around gear, and then all of the gear just starts to make sense. Let me put it this way. When you're just barely starting out, you want to find all of the limitations to the equipment that you have. Once you have a direction, once you're already starting to produce content, you kind of know what flavor that you want to produce, then the gear simply fills a need. For example, let's say that I was shooting on my old iPhone and all of a sudden the sun goes down on my shoot and it's super dark. Then I can look at a camera like the Sony FX3 with dual native ISO at 800 and 12,800, basically sees in the dark, and it fulfills that problem. I was shooting in low light, I didn't like the image in low light, so I upgraded my gear and found something that fixed my problem. I really think that's the way that you should approach it when you're just barely getting into this industry, is gear is simply there to solve problems. If you don't have a problem, don't upgrade the gear. Now, I do get that that's kind of just the philosophical non-answer, is just do better and you'll learn the gear. But anyone who's doing this professionally and at the top of their game is hopefully going to understand what I'm trying to convey. But that being said, I do want to run you through some of the gear that I use because I understand it, and at least a little into why this specific gear solved problems that I had. The first camera that I ever purchased was the Sony a6100. And on that note, I do highly recommend any of the Sony A series, the a6100, 500, a6700, that's a newer release. All of those cameras are in tiny compact bodies, APS-C sensor, and really give a phenomenal image for the price, most of which I think are around $1,000 or even less than $1,000 US. But this is the camera that started it all for me. I started setting up talking head videos, I filmed little B-roll segments for things, and that's really kind of what got my fire ignited and made me think I really want to create high quality content. But obviously that camera comes with some caveats. It has an APS-C sensor, so it's not full frame. It runs the smaller version of the Sony batteries. I don't know what they're called, but they don't last as long. And without doing like a Gerald Undone dive into all the specs on the camera, it simply didn't put out a super high quality image, especially when getting into higher frame rates. The second camera I ever purchased was then the A7R A7R4. Now this was definitely a big step up, especially in the photo realm, but that's exactly why I ended up not keeping the camera for very long. Now, my dad and I are both very creatively minded. He's done graphic design as long as I can remember, and then I started getting into this video realm, and we both started to solve a lot of these problems together. I bought the A7R4 and he ended up going and buying the FX3. Now, the problem with this that we ended up finding out is that my dad became more of a photographer and I ended up being more of a video guy. So we ended up just one day sitting there and realizing what we both wanted out of a camera and just decided to swap hands. So I ended up with the Sony FX3 and my dad ended up with the A7R4, and it filled both of our needs. Both of those cameras are pretty top tier for the type of content that they make, but they're simply different and fulfill different purposes. Now that's really what I wanted to just drill in on the conversation about gear when you're starting out, as well as when you get into the professional realm, is that different gear provides different value. And the only way to really understand that value is to first go out and figure out what content you want to make. And once you've done that, then turn around and either use the gear and make mistakes and learn from it, or do research and find someone who is in the niche that you want to be into and take recommendations from them. Now, I think that's a perfect segue into some of the gear that I use now and why I use them to fulfill specific needs. So obviously I shoot pretty much everything on my Sony FX3 with a 16 to 35 millimeter lens. The FX3 is what you're previewing on our B cam over here. There's no crazy science into why I'm using it. I just personally think that the FX3 is one of the best compact cameras on the market. And as someone who is incredibly run and gun and just wants to have a camera that functions very well for video, the FX3 takes the cake. I'm not going to do a deep dive into all the specs and whatnot. There's plenty of content surrounding the FX3. That's just my main shooter. Now, for a very long time, my B cam was always the A7 IV. This, I think, is one of the best hybrid cameras of all time. It has a 33 megapixel sensor, but also shoots full frame 4K video, up to 4K 60 where it has a little bit of a crop, but in reality, incredibly solid camera for around $2,500 US. But following in line with the whole conversation I just had about gear, I started to run into problems with my A7 IV. Primarily that it just overheated all the time. I couldn't figure out how to get that camera to just run for over 45 minutes to an hour long. I have a friend named Zach that had me on his podcast, and both he and I had A7 IVs. I didn't have my FX3 with me. I had left it at home. So we're both sitting there with our A7 IVs trying to film this video, talking back and forth for 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in there. And his A7 IV would overheat, and then we would put it in the fridge and we would hook up my camera, my A7 IV, and then run that until his was cooled down. Mine would overheat. We would take his out of the fridge, swap it with mine, put mine in the fridge. And I think we had to do that like 3 or 4 different times before we were able to finally finish filming this podcast, which the cameras were running for at most in total an hour and a half. Now, for someone like me who wants to just be on the go, shooting, filming, and not have to worry about overheating my camera, especially if I'm filming outdoors, because this was all indoors, that was a really big issue that I had to overcome. Now, the solution to my problem, which I think Sony did a phenomenal job with now that I've used it, is the camera angle that you are currently viewing, which is my Sony FX2. This has all pretty much the same internals, the same sensor as the A7 IV, but with some different software upgrades that give it AI autofocus, and the biggest change, which is the body style. It's in a very similar body to the Sony FX3 and FX30 line, but obviously with that bigger viewfinder, which I don't find as annoying as I thought that I would initially. It was basically magic that Sony performed to just take this beautiful hybrid that was one of my favorite cameras and take all the problems that I had with it and just completely got rid of them by putting them in a camera body with internal fans that won't overheat and improving the autofocus. It still has the crop at 4K 60, which is a limitation, but when I'm using it for the purpose that I have, which is as a B cam or as a vlog cam, where most of my shooting is going to be in 24 or 30 frames per second, it's perfect. But that's pretty much it on the camera side of things. I have a variety of different lenses that I have, and I'm always buying and selling and finding things that kind of fit the needs that I have. But I think that's it for the camera equipment specifically. I have a lot of different lenses and random things that I'm buying and using and testing out all the time. But like I said, I always just upgrade my gear and switch when I start to have problems with what I'm using. As far as other gear that I use very regularly, I love the DJI RS3 Mini Gimbal. I've used some of the bigger variations in the past, and sometimes I have to use them if I'm gonna rig up my gimbal on a car mount or something like that. But the RS3 Mini is one of the best gimbals that gives me incredibly stable footage, does balance with the FX3 and with a 16-35 or a 24-70 millimeter. And honestly, I think it's the best value in a gimbal for the price point ever. Comes in at less than $300 and can balance a $7,000 camera setup. Wild. And when all said and done, that's pretty much all I have in my camera bag. I have some batteries and things to charge and cables and all that, but it's primarily just my camera, the lens, and the gimbal. Now, I don't want to spend too much time in this video just mulling over gear, so I'm going to have future videos where I go into more depth, go behind the scenes on all the camera equipment, different things that I use, kind of a what's in my camera bag type of video. But for this video, I want to move on to some other questions. Now, the next two biggest questions that I get asked are, how did I get started out and what did I do to go from zero to where I am now? And if I had to start again, what would I do? And I think that this one is super interesting because in a lot of ways, the process that I took and the way that I did it is foundationally how I would do it again and what I would recommend to other people to do again. But at the same time, I have learned a lot and there are a lot of things that I would do differently. So I'm gonna kind of intertwine these two questions into one as I walk through how I started and why what I did was either good and things that I think you should emulate, or things that I did wrong and ways to do it better now. Like I said before, I started off with my Sony a6100, and for me it was purely hobby. I just spent tons of time setting up lights and moving things around, and really for like the first year that I owned the camera, I don't even think I posted that much. I just spent so much time sitting, messing with things, playing back and forth, because I think the most important thing to this process and understanding if you want to be into it professionally is, would you do it for no money? Do you just enjoy it for the sake of the game? And at least for me, when I was starting out, it was absolutely. I just love to create things. I didn't even really think it was going to be that big of a thing in my life. I still had ideas about going to school or into a trade, something like that, but content wasn't really priority number one as far as income and success. I just wanted to create cool things and spend a lot of time doing it. So in that process, I was making no money from my camera and just wanted to grow my skill set. And I think that's where a lot of you guys are going to be, just wanting to step into the game, but not having financial ties. Now, one of the lessons from my experience and the way that I think that those of you who are just starting out should do the same is that content wasn't an immediate financial backing for me. I had to have something else that was bringing in income while I could sit and mess with this, and it was purely just a hobby, and I did it just for the fun of it. This is one thing that I think really enabled me to have no burnout. I was able to just put time and effort into it that was unmatched because I simply just enjoyed it and wanted to be good at it. I think too many times when you sit there, you think, oh, if I can't make money from my camera, I just need to give it up. And it's really an all or nothing conversation. But for me, it wasn't the case. And I think for you guys starting out, it shouldn't be either. I highly recommend finding some outside source of making income. For me, it was construction and other miscellaneous projects. For you, it could be working anywhere. Find an opportunity, something preferably in the niche if you can. If you can find a way, working with an assistant or something like that. One thing that I ended up doing later on was working part-time, I think $10 an hour for a buddy of mine who's a photographer, just shooting behind the scenes of his senior portrait sessions and of other random jobs he had, just doing some of the editing for him. And that's kind of what helped catalyst me into actually creating content and getting paid for it. Now, the way that I ended up stepping out of this was by getting myself a job that put myself in content creation. For me, this was taking on an opportunity to shoot and edit videos for a local guy who does real estate investments named Chandler Smith. Maybe like a week or two before having the conversation with Chandler, I just barely got a job installing countertops with a buddy of mine and was just gonna be still on that construction route while I figured out the camera thing. And Chandler ended up needing someone to shoot and edit his videos because his current videographer had left overseas. Now, lucky for me, Chandler needed someone who was full-time that could help shoot and edit everything. So I was immediately able to quit the other jobs that I was working on and start pursuing this. It wasn't a crazy amount of money and it wasn't my own channel, but it was a way for me to go full-time creating content and getting paid to level up my skills. Now, from there is where everything really just took off. Through working with Chandler, I ended up meeting so many incredible people that I'm still friends with and work with today. And a lot of those people have also given me great opportunities. Now, today I'm known as someone who creates short form automotive content. And really all of that started with Chandler. One day I was just sitting and editing videos and I got a call that he had just barely purchased a Lamborghini. And a few of our other friends had purchased cars as well. But here's the kicker. All the comfort that I had in learning the storytelling, learning to work with Chandler, and kind of the rigidity in the niche that I was in all went away. Because as soon as I started to film cars for fun, I started to see this content from people that I wanted to emulate. Some of these high quality After Effects speed ramped edits. And I had never opened After Effects before at all. And at the time, a few years ago, there was very little content about After Effects. And definitely nothing that was going into detail on the timer mapping and the stabilization and all the things that we have more readily available to us now. And so for at least the first year that I started creating this short form content and learning about cars and wanting to film that, it was just a side thing for me. I might have made like 50 to 100 bucks here and there as I was working with my friends and just filming videos for fun with them. But it really was just me sacrificing the time outside of the other job that I had just to learn the systems. This is that period in time where I was in Discord with Redmond and Jerry and some of these other very talented content creators, and we would just spend hundreds of hours just sitting in the software learning different things. One of us would find a plugin or extension to share it with the rest of us, and it was this perfect little community we created to help elevate each other. Which brings me to the second piece of advice that I have from my content journey, and that's that you really do need to find people in your niche that can help you to level up your skills. We would sit and criticize each other's work, we would share different plugins, extensions, they would help me. Timer mapping, everything that we're currently doing all stemmed from us just sitting down, having conversations together, having fun, doing competitions. None of us really made any good money from it. We just wanted to be good at things and we just spent time doing it. That community is really what gave me the passion to just sit and create these types of videos that I have now. Now, one reason it's super important to have this side niche that I was into, which was cars, was that I was able to really enjoy it. And because I wasn't getting paid for these videos, I could make them whatever I wanted. The more time that I spent editing, color grading, and crafting these videos, the more it really turned into a very unique style to me and the things that I wanted to personally create. Which leads me to the next part of my story that I want to tell, which is building a personal brand. I was able to take all this time and all this energy that we spent making cool content and things that we wanted into a unique style that I can then sell to clients. A client isn't just going to hire you because you make a hype edit. They're going to be interested in working with you if you create content that no one else does. Which taps into another question I get asked a lot, that's how do I get paying clients? And the best advice I have for that is to create content that is uniquely your own and that sets you apart from other videographers. You may never be fully original and you may still follow trends, but you can do it in a way that reflects your personal style and your own unique flavor. Now, this is a process that I'm still a part of, and I'm still trying to grow my brand and my agency and figure out exactly what type of content I want to create. And kind of the undertone of it all is that I create content that I want because I want to do it, and then the brands become interested. Now, all of this kind of leads us to another question I've gotten from you guys, which is, what is the most valuable lesson that I've learned? And to put it simply, it's just that I love what I do. I spend time sitting and messing with this setup because I like to see how it looks on camera. I spend time setting up all different software to be able to preview things because I just want to see it. And even if I don't post a video, I get personal enjoyment and fulfillment from just the process of content creation. And I love to express that enjoyment with all of you guys, which is the hard part because then I end up setting it all up and not recording videos. Now, really what I'm trying to say with this whole video is that if you love what you do and you're willing to spend time and put effort and sacrifice towards the content and what you want to do, then there's really no limitations. If you sit down and you know the types of videos that you want to make, you start to spend time to learn it, then the gear doesn't matter. You're going to learn what gear fits the needs that you have. The process is going to get easier. Clients are going to come to you. You're going to have a unique style and you're not going to burn out because it's genuinely what you love. Now, to add on to that, I think an equally valuable lesson that I've learned in this process, which will apply to any business, not just content creation, is to be very authentic. You want to be the same person on camera, off camera, and everywhere. Everything that you do, everything that you say should be a reflection of yourself, your character, your values. Because no matter what industry you get into, whether it's construction, finance, content creation, literally anything, The only thing that's going to remain consistent is who you are as a person, the values that you have. And just like that, we've stepped all the way back to being in the psychological realm. But really, I think that that's what it comes down to, is your own head. What do you want? What are you willing to do for it? And everything in between really just kind of fills in the gaps. Now, like I said before, I'm really excited to be creating videos like this. I'm gonna have a lot more that I put out. I wanna go deeper into different types of gear, give you guys behind the scenes of different things that I'm doing, because there's no way for me to get all the information that I want to get to you guys in a single video. So with all that being said, I'm gonna put a wrap on this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way through, subscribe, and be sure to leave a comment on this video. Let me know what you thought of it, and let me know any other questions that you might have. And with that, we'll see you guys in the next one.